बढ़ाएगा, इन्वेस्टमेंट को बढ़ाएगा, कंजम्पशन को बढ़ाएगा और ग्रोथ को भी तेजी से बढ़ाएगा। मैं वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण जी और उनकी पूरी टीम को इस जनता जनार्दन का बजट, पीपल्स का बजट, इसके लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। साथियों, आमतौर पर बजट का फोकस इस बात पर रहता है कि सरकार का खजाना कैसे भरेगा, लेकिन ये बजट उससे बिल्कुल उल्टा है। लेकिन ये बजट देश के नागरिकों की जेब कैसे भरेगी, देश के नागरिकों की बचत कैसे बढ़ेगी और देश के नागरिक विकास के भागीदार कैसे बनेंगे, ये बजट इसकी एक बहुत मजबूत नींव रखता है। साथियों, इस बजट में रिफॉर्म की दिशा में महत्वपूर्ण कदम उठाए गए हैं। न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी में प्राइवेट सेक्टर को बढ़ावा देने का निर्णय बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक है। ये आने वाले समय में सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी का बड़ा योगदान देश के विकास में सुनिश्चित करेगा। बजट में रोजगार के सभी क्षेत्रों को हर प्रकार से प्राथमिकता दी गई है। लेकिन मैं दो चीजों पर ध्यान आकर्षित करना चाहूंगा। उन रिफॉर्म्स की मैं चर्चा करना चाहूंगा जो आने वाले समय में बहुत बड़ा परिवर्तन लाने वाले हैं। एक, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्टेटस देने के कारण भारत में बड़े शिप्स के निर्माण को बढ़ावा मिलेगा, आत्मनिर्भर भारत अभियान को गति मिलेगी। और हम सब जानते हैं कि शिप बिल्डिंग ये सर्वाधिक रोजगार देने वाला क्षेत्र है। उसी प्रकार से देश में टूरिज्म के लिए बहुत संभावना है। महत्वपूर्ण 50 टूरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन, वहां पर जो होटल्स बनाएंगे, उस होटल को पहली बार इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के दायरे में लाकर टूरिज्म पर बहुत बल दिया है। इससे हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर को, जो रोजगार का बहुत बड़ा क्षेत्र है, और टूरिज्म जो रोजगार का सबसे बड़ा क्षेत्र है, एक प्रकार से चारों तरफ रोजगार के अवसर पैदा करने वाला एक क्षेत्र को ऊर्जा देने वाला काम करेगा। आज देश विकास भी, विरासत भी, इस मंत्र को लेकर चल रहा है। इस बजट में भी इसके लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण और ठोस कदम उठाए गए हैं। 1 करोड़ पांडुलिपियों के लिए संरक्षण के लिए, मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट के लिए ज्ञान भारतम मिशन लॉन्च किया गया है। साथ ही भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा से प्रेरित एक नेशनल डिजिटल रिपोजिटरी बनाई जाएगी। यानी टेक्नोलॉजी का भरपूर उपयोग किया जाएगा और हमारा जो परंपरागत ज्ञान है उसमें से अमृत निचोड़ने का भी काम होगा। साथियों, बजट में किसानों के लिए जो घोषणा हुई है वो कृषि क्षेत्र और समूची ग्रामीण अर्थव्यवस्था में नई क्रांति का आधार बनेगी। पीएम धन धान्य कृषि योजना के तहत 100 जिलों में सिंचाई और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का डेवलपमेंट होगा। किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड की लिमिट 5 लाख तक होने से उन्हें ज्यादा मदद मिलेगी। साथियों, अब इस बजट में 12 लाख रुपए तक की आय को टैक्स से मुक्त कर दिया गया है। सभी आय वर्ग के लोगों के लिए टैक्स में भी कमी की गई है। इसका बहुत बड़ा फायदा हमारे मिडिल क्लास को, नौकरी पेशे करने वाले, जिनकी आय बंधी हुई है, ऐसे लोगों को, मिडिल क्लास को इससे बहुत बड़ा लाभ होने वाला है। उसी प्रकार से जो नए नए प्रोफेशन में आए हैं, जिनको नए नए जॉब मिले हैं, इनकम टैक्स की ये मुक्ति उनके लिए एक बहुत बड़ा अवसर बन जाएगी। साथियों, इस बजट में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पर 360 डिग्री फोकस है, ताकि एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को, एमएसएमईज को, छोटे उद्यमियों को मजबूती मिले और नई जॉब पैदा हो। नेशनल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग मिशन से लेकर क्लीन टेक, लेदर, फुटवियर, टॉय इंडस्ट्री जैसे अनेक सेक्टर्स को विशेष समर्थन दिया गया है। लक्ष्य साफ है कि भारतीय प्रोडक्ट्स ग्लोबल मार्केट में अपनी चमक बिखेर सके। साथियों, राज्यों में इन्वेस्टमेंट का एक वाइब्रेंट कॉम्पिटिटिव माहौल बने, इस पर बजट में विशेष जोर दिया गया है। एमएसएमईज और स्टार्टअप के लिए क्रेडिट गारंटी को दोगुना करने की घोषणा भी हुई है। देश के एससी, एसटी और महिला जो नए उद्यमी बनना चाहते हैं, उनको 2 करोड़ रुपए तक के लोन की योजना भी लाई गई है, और वो भी बिना गारंटी। इस बजट में न्यू एज इकोनॉमी को ध्यान में रखते हुए गीग वर्कर्स के लिए बहुत बड़ी घोषणा की गई है। पहली बार गीग वर्कर्स का ई श्रम पोर्टल पर रजिस्ट्रेशन किया जाएगा। इसके बाद इन साथियों को स्वास्थ्य सेवा और दूसरी सोशल सिक्योरिटी स्कीम्स का लाभ मिलेगा। ये डिग्निटी ऑफ लेबर, इसके प्रति, श्रम एव जयते के प्रति सरकार के कमिटमेंट को दर्शाता है। रेगुलेटरी रिफॉर्म से लेकर फाइनेंशियल रिफॉर्म्स, जन विश्वास 2.0 जैसे कदमों से मिनिमम गवर्नमेंट और ट्रस्ट बेस्ड गवर्नेंस के हमारे कमिटमेंट को और बल मिलेगा। साथियों, ये बजट न केवल देश की वर्तमान आवश्यकताओं को ध्यान में रखता है, बल्कि हमें भविष्य की तैयारी करने में भी मदद करता है। स्टार्टअप के लिए डीप टेक फंड, जियोस्पेशियल मिशन और न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी मिशन ऐसे ही महत्वपूर्ण कदम है। मैं सभी देशवासियों को एक बार फिर इस ऐतिहासिक पीपल्स बजट की बधाई देता हूं, और फिर एक बार वित्त मंत्री जी को भी बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Okay, so that's Prime Minister Modi hailing the budget, referring to it as a Janta Janardan budget, a people's budget, speaking about the focus on infrastructure, on manufacturing, and also the fact that the budget is focused on social security for gig workers, about AI. All of that is something that the Prime Minister has referred to while going ahead and hailing this budget, calling it a force multiplier and saying that it's essentially for the people. The Prime Minister congratulating Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman over the budget, speaking about infrastructure, talking about how the focus is essentially on building a self-reliant India. He's also said that on the focus on farmers, this budget will help farmers a great deal, will revolutionize agriculture in the country. Interestingly, Prime Minister Modi, while also hailing the budget, taking a taunt at the opposition, saying previous governments only believed in looting the people for their own benefit. He's focused on this budget, saying it's a people's budget because it gives back to the people, referring to also the changes, the relief that's come in as far as income tax goes. But beyond that, the Prime Minister also has spoken about his vision. He's repeatedly spoken of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And it's along those lines that he speaks of infrastructure, of self-reliance, about creating jobs, revolutionizing agriculture and much more. Let's get your highlights.
आमतौर पर बजट का फोकस इस बात पर रहता है कि सरकार का खजाना कैसे भरेगा, लेकिन ये बजट उससे बिल्कुल उल्टा है। लेकिन ये बजट देश के नागरिकों की जेब कैसे भरेगी, देश के नागरिकों की बचत कैसे बढ़ेगी और देश के नागरिक विकास के भागीदार कैसे बनेंगे, ये बजट इसकी एक बहुत मजबूत नींव रखता है। साथियों, इस बजट में रिफॉर्म की दिशा में महत्वपूर्ण कदम उठाए गए हैं। न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी में प्राइवेट सेक्टर को बढ़ावा देने का निर्णय बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक है। ये आने वाले समय में सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी का बड़ा योगदान देश के विकास में सुनिश्चित करेगा। बजट में रोजगार के सभी क्षेत्रों को हर प्रकार से प्राथमिकता दी गई है। देश में टूरिज्म के लिए बहुत संभावना है। महत्वपूर्ण 50 टूरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन, वहां पर जो होटल्स बनाएंगे, उस होटल को पहली बार इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के दायरे में लाकर टूरिज्म पर बहुत बल दिया है। इससे हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर को, जो रोजगार का बहुत बड़ा क्षेत्र है, और टूरिज्म जो रोजगार का सबसे बड़ा क्षेत्र है, एक प्रकार से चारों तरफ रोजगार के अवसर पैदा करने वाला एक क्षेत्र को ऊर्जा देने वाला काम करेगा। आज देश विकास भी, विरासत भी इस मंत्र को लेकर चल रहा है। इस बजट में भी इसके लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण और ठोस कदम उठाए गए हैं। 1 करोड़ पांडुलिपियों के लिए, संरक्षण के लिए, मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट के लिए ज्ञान भारतम मिशन लॉन्च किया गया है। साथ ही भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा से प्रेरित एक नेशनल डिजिटल रिपोजिटरी बनाई जाएगी। यानी टेक्नोलॉजी का भरपूर उपयोग किया जाएगा और हमारा जो परंपरागत ज्ञान है, उसमें से अमृत निचोड़ने का भी काम होगा।
Okay, those were the highlights of what Prime Minister Modi had to say. We'll also be talking about some of the budget highlights. We've told you all about really the tax relief. The Prime Minister saying this is a Janta Janardhan budget.
बजट है। हमने कई सेक्टर्स युवाओं के लिए खोल दिए हैं। सामान्य नागरिक विकसित भारत के मिशन को ड्राइव करने वाला है। ये बजट एक फोर्स मल्टीप्लायर है। ये बजट सेविंग्स को बढ़ाएगा, इन्वेस्टमेंट को बढ़ाएगा, कंजम्पशन को बढ़ाएगा और ग्रोथ को भी तेजी से बढ़ाएगा। मैं वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण जी और उनकी पूरी टीम को इस जनता जनार्दन का बजट, पीपल्स का बजट, इसके लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। साथियों, आमतौर पर बजट का फोकस इस बात पर रहता है कि सरकार का खजाना कैसे भरेगा, लेकिन ये बजट उससे बिल्कुल उल्टा है। लेकिन ये बजट देश के नागरिकों की जेब कैसे भरेगी, देश के नागरिकों की बचत कैसे बढ़ेगी और देश के नागरिक विकास के भागीदार कैसे बनेंगे, ये बजट इसकी एक बहुत मजबूत नींव रखता है। साथियों, इस बजट में रिफॉर्म की दिशा में महत्वपूर्ण कदम उठाए गए हैं। न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी में प्राइवेट सेक्टर को बढ़ावा देने का निर्णय बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक है। ये आने वाले समय में सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी का बड़ा योगदान देश के विकास में सुनिश्चित करेगा। बजट में रोजगार के सभी क्षेत्रों को हर प्रकार से प्राथमिकता दी गई है। लेकिन मैं दो चीजों पर ध्यान आकर्षित करना चाहूंगा। उन रिफॉर्म्स की मैं चर्चा करना चाहूंगा जो आने वाले समय में बहुत बड़ा परिवर्तन लाने वाले हैं। एक, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्टेटस देने के कारण भारत में बड़े शिप्स के निर्माण को बढ़ावा मिलेगा, आत्मनिर्भर भारत अभियान को गति मिलेगी। और हम सब जानते हैं कि शिप बिल्डिंग ये सर्वाधिक रोजगार देने वाला क्षेत्र है। उसी प्रकार से देश में टूरिज्म के लिए बहुत संभावना है। महत्वपूर्ण 50 टूरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन, वहां पर जो होटल्स बनाएंगे, उस होटल को पहली बार इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के दायरे में लाकर टूरिज्म पर बहुत बल दिया है। इससे हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर को, जो रोजगार का बहुत बड़ा क्षेत्र है, और टूरिज्म जो रोजगार का सबसे बड़ा क्षेत्र है, एक प्रकार से चारों तरफ रोजगार के अवसर पैदा करने वाला एक क्षेत्र को ऊर्जा देने वाला काम करेगा। आज देश विकास भी, विरासत भी इस मंत्र को लेकर चल रहा है। इस बजट में भी इसके लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण और ठोस कदम उठाए गए हैं। 1 करोड़ पांडुलिपियों के लिए संरक्षण के लिए, मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट के लिए ज्ञान भारतम मिशन लॉन्च किया गया है। साथ ही भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा से प्रेरित एक नेशनल डिजिटल रिपोजिटरी बनाई जाएगी। यानी टेक्नोलॉजी का भरपूर उपयोग किया जाएगा और हमारा जो परंपरागत ज्ञान है उसमें से अमृत निचोड़ने का भी काम होगा। साथियों, बजट में किसानों के लिए जो घोषणा हुई है वो कृषि क्षेत्र और समूची ग्रामीण अर्थव्यवस्था में नई क्रांति का आधार बनेगी। पीएम धन धान्य कृषि योजना के तहत 100 जिलों में सिंचाई और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का डेवलपमेंट होगा। किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड की लिमिट 5 लाख तक होने से उन्हें ज्यादा मदद मिलेगी। साथियों, अब इस बजट में 12 लाख रुपए तक की आय को टैक्स से मुक्त कर दिया गया है। सभी आय वर्ग के लोगों के लिए टैक्स में भी कमी की गई है। इसका बहुत बड़ा फायदा हमारे मिडिल क्लास को, नौकरी पेशे करने वाले जिनकी आय बंधी हुई है, ऐसे लोगों को, मिडिल क्लास को इससे बहुत बड़ा लाभ होने वाला है। उसी प्रकार से जो नए नए प्रोफेशन में आए हैं, जिनको नए नए जॉब मिले हैं, इनकम टैक्स की ये मुक्ति उनके लिए एक बहुत बड़ा अवसर बन जाएगी। साथियों, इस बजट में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पर 360 डिग्री फोकस है, ताकि एंटरप्रेन्योर्स को, एमएसएमईज को, छोटे उद्यमियों को मजबूती मिले और नई जॉब पैदा हो। नेशनल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग मिशन से लेकर क्लीन टेक, लेदर, फुटवियर, टॉय इंडस्ट्री जैसे अनेक सेक्टर्स को विशेष समर्थन दिया गया है। लक्ष्य साफ है कि भारतीय प्रोडक्ट्स ग्लोबल मार्केट में अपनी चमक बिखेर सके। साथियों, राज्यों में इन्वेस्टमेंट का एक वाइब्रेंट कॉम्पिटिटिव माहौल बने, इस पर बजट में विशेष जोर दिया गया है। एमएसएमईज और स्टार्टअप के लिए क्रेडिट गारंटी को दोगुना करने की घोषणा भी हुई है। देश के एससी, एसटी और महिला जो नए उद्यमी बनना चाहते हैं, उनको 2 करोड़ रुपए तक के लोन की योजना भी लाई गई है, और वो भी बिना गारंटी। इस बजट में न्यू एज इकोनॉमी को ध्यान में रखते हुए गीग वर्कर्स के लिए बहुत बड़ी घोषणा की गई है। पहली बार गीग वर्कर्स का ई श्रम पोर्टल पर रजिस्ट्रेशन किया जाएगा। इसके बाद इन साथियों को स्वास्थ्य सेवा और दूसरी सोशल सिक्योरिटी स्कीम्स का लाभ मिलेगा। ये डिग्निटी ऑफ लेबर, इसके प्रति, श्रम एव जयते के प्रति सरकार के कमिटमेंट को दर्शाता है। रेगुलेटरी रिफॉर्म से लेकर फाइनेंशियल रिफॉर्म्स, जन विश्वास 2.0 जैसे कदमों से मिनिमम गवर्नमेंट और ट्रस्ट बेस्ड गवर्नेंस के हमारे कमिटमेंट को और बल मिलेगा। साथियों, ये बजट न केवल देश की वर्तमान आवश्यकताओं को ध्यान में रखता है, बल्कि हमें भविष्य की तैयारी करने में भी मदद करता है। स्टार्टअप के लिए डीप टेक फंड, जियोस्पेशल मिशन और न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी मिशन ऐसे ही महत्वपूर्ण कदम है। मैं सभी देशवासियों को एक बार फिर इस ऐतिहासिक पीपल्स बजट की बधाई देता हूं, और फिर एक बार वित्त मंत्री जी को भी बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Okay, so that's Prime Minister Modi hailing the budget, referring to it as a Janta Janardhan budget, a people's budget, speaking about the focus on infrastructure, on manufacturing, and also the fact that the budget is focused on social security for gig workers, about AI. All of that is something that the Prime Minister has referred to while going ahead and hailing this budget, calling it a force multiplier and saying that it's essentially for the people. The Prime Minister congratulating Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman over the budget, speaking about infrastructure, talking about how the focus is essentially on building a self-reliant India. He's also said that on the focus on farmers, this budget will help farmers a great deal, will revolutionize agriculture in the country. Interestingly, Prime Minister Modi, while also hailing the budget, taking a taunt at the opposition, saying previous governments only believed in looting the people for their own benefit. He's focused on this budget, saying it's a people's budget because it gives back to the people, referring to also the changes, the relief that's come in as far as income tax goes. But beyond that, the Prime Minister also has spoken about his vision. He's repeatedly spoken of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And it's along those lines that he speaks of infrastructure, of self-reliance, about creating jobs, revolutionizing agriculture and much more. Let's get your highlights.
आमतौर पर बजट का फोकस इस बात पर रहता है कि सरकार का खजाना कैसे भरेगा। लेकिन ये बजट उससे बिल्कुल उल्टा है। लेकिन ये बजट देश के नागरिकों की जेब कैसे भरेगी, देश के नागरिकों की बचत कैसे बढ़ेगी और देश के नागरिक विकास के भागीदार कैसे बनेंगे, ये बजट इसकी एक बहुत मजबूत नींव रखता है। साथियों, इस बजट में रिफॉर्म की दिशा में महत्वपूर्ण कदम उठाए गए हैं। न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी में प्राइवेट सेक्टर को बढ़ावा देने का निर्णय बहुत ही ऐतिहासिक है। ये आने वाले समय में सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी का बड़ा योगदान देश के विकास में सुनिश्चित करेगा। बजट में रोजगार के सभी क्षेत्रों को हर प्रकार से प्राथमिकता दी गई है। देश में टूरिज्म के लिए बहुत संभावना है। महत्वपूर्ण 50 टूरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन, वहां पर जो होटल्स बनाएंगे, उस होटल को पहली बार इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के दायरे में लाकर टूरिज्म पर बहुत बल दिया है। इससे हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर को, जो रोजगार का बहुत बड़ा क्षेत्र है, और टूरिज्म जो रोजगार का सबसे बड़ा क्षेत्र है, एक प्रकार से चारों तरफ रोजगार के अवसर पैदा करने वाला एक क्षेत्र को ऊर्जा देने वाला काम करेगा। आज देश विकास भी, विरासत भी, इस मंत्र को लेकर चल रहा है। इस बजट में भी इसके लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण और ठोस कदम उठाए गए हैं। 1 करोड़ पांडुलिपियों के लिए, संरक्षण के लिए, मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट के लिए ज्ञान भारतम मिशन लॉन्च किया गया है। साथ ही भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा से प्रेरित एक नेशनल डिजिटल रिपोजिटरी बनाई जाएगी। यानी टेक्नोलॉजी का भरपूर उपयोग किया जाएगा और हमारा जो परंपरागत ज्ञान है, उसमें से अमृत निचोड़ने का भी काम होगा। बजट है। हमने कई सेक्टर्स युवाओं के लिए खोल दिए हैं। सामान्य नागरिक विकसित भारत के मिशन को ड्राइव करने वाला है। यह बजट एक फोर्स मल्टीप्लायर है। यह बजट सेविंग्स को बढ़ाएगा, इन्वेस्टमेंट को बढ़ाएगा, कंजम्पशन को बढ़ाएगा और ग्रोथ को भी तेजी से बढ़ाएगा। मैं वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण जी और उनकी पूरी टीम को इस जनता जनार्दन का बजट, पीपल्स का बजट, इसके लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। साथियों, आमतौर पर बजट का फोकस इस बात पर रहता है कि सरकार का खजाना कैसे भरेगा, लेकिन ये बजट उससे बिल्कुल उल्टा है। लेकिन ये बजट देश के नागरिकों की जेब कैसे भरेगी।
Hello and welcome. You're joining us live here on India Today for our rolling coverage where we decode for you all the highlights of Budget 2025. Nirmala Sitharaman announcing, as expected, big income tax relief for the middle class. I'll break down for you what exactly that means for you and for the salaried class. Let's begin. First, as always, with the headlines. Big relief for middle and salaried class in budget. No income tax till 12 lakh income per year. Nil tax slab extended from 7 lakh to 12 lakh. Now save up to 80,000 rupees per year in taxes. Prime Minister Modi hails budget, calls it the Janta Janardan budget, says tax relief for all income groups, claims other governments looted whereas the BJP is giving money. Big Bihar focus in union budget, capacity expansion of Patna airport, new greenfield airports to come up, a Makhana boat to be set up for farmers. Big healthcare push in budget. No custom duty on 36 life-saving drugs, 200 cancer daycare centers and district hospitals. EV and mobile batteries set to get cheaper. Defence budget hike in the union budget. 6.81 lakh crore allotted. Emphasis on Atmanirbhar boost. Focus on modernization and on welfare. Politics over union budget. Congress claims Bihar sobs in budget because of election, says past promises yet to be fulfilled. Akhilesh claims Kumbh stampede deaths are more important than the budget. It's the biggest income tax relief for India's middle class in the last many years. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in today's budget announced a mega tax bonanza, one that was expected considering that there were hints dropped by the government for the last many days that they would be focusing on announcing some tax relief for the middle class. So what exactly is the relief? Well, essentially, if you earn an income of up to 12 lakh rupees, you won't have to pay income tax. No income tax payable considering the rebate. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced changes also in the tax slabs. If you choose, that is, the new tax regime, in a clear push to get more people to switch over from the old tax regime to the new tax regime. So first is, of course, the zero income tax for earnings up to 12 lakh rupees or 12.75 lakh rupees for salary taxpayers with a standard deduction of 75,000. But beyond that also, let's look at the other figures. Those earning 18 lakhs and above will get 70,000 tax benefit. Those in the slab of 25 lakh rupees income and above will get a tax benefit of 1,25,000 rupees. Now, clearly that is very different from what the rates were previously. So they've changed up entirely what really the slabs are in the new tax regime. Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman soon after she presented the budget, acknowledging that everyone's praising her for rolling out a good budget. He's referred to this as the people's budget, saying most governments were focused on ensuring that government coffers are filled up. He says our focus is on ensuring the people's savings go up, boost people's savings.
The middle class provides strength for India's growth. This government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has always believed in the admirable energy and ability of the middle class in nation building. In recognition of their contribution, we have periodically reduced their tax burden. Right after 2014, the nil tax slab was raised to 2.5 lakhs of rupees, which was further raised to 5 lakh rupees in 2019 and to 7 lakh rupees in 2023. This is reflective of our government's trust on the middle class taxpayers. I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees. Slabs and rates are being changed across the board to benefit all taxpayers. The new structure will substantially reduce the taxes of the middle class and leave more money in their hands, boosting household consumption, savings, and investment. In the new tax regime, I propose to revise tax rate structures as follows: 0 to 4 lakh rupees nil, 4.8 lakh rupees to 4 to 8 lakh rupees 5%, 8 to 12 lakh rupees 10%, 12 to 16 lakh rupees 15%, 16 to 20 lakh rupees 20%, 20 to 24 lakh rupees 25%, and above 24 lakh rupees 30%. To taxpayers up to 12 lakh of normal income, other than special rate income such as capital gains. I read that again. To taxpayers up to 12 lakh of income, other than special rate income such as capital gains, tax rebate is being provided in addition to the benefit due to slab rate reduction in such a manner that there is no tax payable by them. Our government is committed to keeping an ear to the ground and a finger on the pulse and responding while balancing our national building efforts. The following measures will detail just how our government, under the guidance of PM Modi, has taken steps to understand and address the needs voiced by our citizens. My tax proposals are guided by this spirit. The objectives of my proposals are as follows: personal income tax reforms with special focus on middle class, rationalization of TDS and TCS for easing difficulties, encouraging voluntary compliance, reducing compliance burden, ease of doing business, employment and investment.
ये बजट न केवल देश की वर्तमान आवश्यकताओं को ध्यान में रखता है, बल्कि हमें भविष्य की तैयारी करने में भी मदद करता है। स्टार्टअप के लिए डीप टेक फंड, जियोस्पेशियल मिशन और न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी मिशन ऐसे ही महत्वपूर्ण कदम है। मैं सभी देशवासियों को एक बार फिर इस ऐतिहासिक पीपल्स बजट की बधाई देता हूं और फिर एक बार वित्त मंत्री जी को भी बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। अब इस बजट में 12 लाख रुपए तक की आय को टैक्स से मुक्त कर दिया गया है। सभी आय वर्ग के लोगों के लिए टैक्स में भी कमी की गई है। इसका बहुत बड़ा फायदा हमारे मिडिल क्लास को, नौकरी पेशे करने वाले, जिनकी आय बंधी हुई है, ऐसे लोगों को, मिडिल क्लास को इससे बहुत बड़ा लाभ होने वाला है। उसी प्रकार से जो नए नए प्रोफेशन में आए हैं, जिनको नए नए जॉब मिले हैं, इनकम टैक्स की ये मुक्ति उनके लिए एक बहुत बड़ा अवसर बन जाएगी। आमतौर पर बजट का फोकस इस बात पर रहता है कि सरकार का खजाना कैसे भरेगा, लेकिन ये बजट उससे बिल्कुल उल्टा है। लेकिन ये बजट देश के नागरिकों की जेब कैसे भरेगी, देश के नागरिकों की बचत कैसे बढ़ेगी। बजट में किसानों के लिए जो घोषणा हुई है वो कृषि क्षेत्र और समूची ग्रामीण अर्थव्यवस्था में नई क्रांति का आधार बनेगी। पीएम धन धान्य कृषि योजना के तहत 100 जिलों में सिंचाई और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का डेवलपमेंट होगा। किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड की लिमिट 5 लाख तक होने से उन्हें ज्यादा मदद मिलेगी। न्यू एज इकोनॉमी को ध्यान में रखते हुए गीग वर्कर्स के लिए बहुत बड़ी घोषणा की गई है। पहली बार गीग वर्कर्स का ई श्रम पोर्टल पर रजिस्ट्रेशन किया जाएगा। इसके बाद इन साथियों को स्वास्थ्य सेवा और दूसरी सोशल सिक्योरिटी स्कीम्स का लाभ मिलेगा। ये डिग्निटी ऑफ लेबर, इसके प्रति श्रम एव जयते के प्रति सरकार के कमिटमेंट को दर्शाता है। रेगुलेटरी रिफॉर्म से लेकर फाइनेंशियल रिफॉर्म्स, जन विश्वास 2.0 जैसे कदमों से मिनिमम गवर्नमेंट और ट्रस्ट बेस्ड गवर्नेंस के हमारे कमिटमेंट को और बल मिलेगा।
ये जो बजट की विशेषता ये है कि हमारी इकोनॉमी को एक्सेलरेट करने वाला ये बजट है। जहां तक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को हर समय वित्त मंत्री प्राथमिकता देते हैं, इस समय भी हमारा बजट बढ़ा है, जिसके कारण इंफ्रा रोड सेक्टर में इसका बहुत बड़ा फायदा होगा। मुझे इस बात की खुशी है कि कृषि विभाग की ओर उन्होंने विशेष रूप से ध्यान दिया है। तिलहन हो, विशेष रूप से तेल बिया हो, इसके उत्पादन कैसे बढ़े और किसान आत्मनिर्भर कैसे बने, इसका भी विचार किया गया है। विशेष रूप से इनकम टैक्स के बारे में एक रिफॉर्म करके नया कानून लाकर इसको और सरलीकरण उसका करना, ये जनता के लिए बहुत बड़ी राहत होगी।
वित्तीय वर्ष 2025-26 के बजट में डिफेंस मिनिस्ट्री को 6,81,000 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक का एलोकेशन किया गया है, जो पिछले साल के बजट एलोकेशन से 9.5% अधिक है। और मुझे बताते हुए प्रसन्नता हो रही है कि डिफेंस बजट यूनियन बजट का लगभग 13.44% है। डिफेंस फोर्सेस का मॉडर्नाइजेशन हमारी सरकार की यह प्राथमिकता रही है।
बिहार के साथ साथ पूरे राज्य के लिए पूरा
the whole budget, the income,
चाहे किसानों टैक्स
मिडिल क्लास,
आई थिंक इट्स अ इकोनॉमी।
विशेष रूप से इसको
lot of the burden of growth the government took on its shoulders through capacity expansion via public infrastructure. Now the government is changing the calculus, handing money to the middle class, to the taxpayer who seem to be getting irked, whose mood seemed despondent, saying, okay, here is extra cash in your hands. Let's see the multiplier this has on the Indian economy. To talk about the potential impact on growth of this union budget, we've set up a corporate brainstorm here at the CII headquarters. We're broadcasting from the Le Méridien. And I want to introduce you to my guests joining me for this special discussion. I want to start with Sanjeev Puri. He heads up ITC, is currently the president of CII, so welcome. Flanking him is Chandrajit Banerjee, who had several crucial inputs in the formulation of this budget. On behalf of India Inc., is the Director General of CII, so welcome. We have the incoming president of CII, Rajiv Memani, heads up Ernst & Young in India. Thank you, sir, for taking our time. To my left, I want to welcome Mr. Mukundan from Tata Chemicals. Then we've got the infrastructure meme, Vinayak Chatterjee. And we've got Naresh Trehan, who's representing the pharma sector, health sector. And remember, not just during this budget, we're also hearing from Donald Trump that there could be new tariffs against the Indian pharma sector. So what impact will that have? Let me start by asking Sanjeev Puri about the potential impact on growth. Because if India needs to be in Amrit Kal, become a developed country by 2047, we need to go 8% plus. The economic advisor said we're likely to grow between 6.3 to 6.8 next year. Do you see the maths in the way the finance minister has organized it having a positive impact on growth for next fiscal?
Absolutely, Rahul. I think the estimates, no doubt, for next year are realistic. But very clearly, the pillars have been identified to accelerate this growth going forward. And there are multiple levers that are being touched upon. One is really a lot of focus on areas or economic activities which have a high labor intensity. So agriculture being one, MSMEs, within MSMEs, things like toys, then we're talking of tourism, a lot of focus on exports and this whole idea to have an integrated view, cross-ministerial group, because, you know, given the global context, we need agile responses and very targeted responses, and there are already barriers coming up in global trade. So, you know, FTAs, many of these things have to be negotiated. And then there is also investments in developing the innovative capacity, human capital development is happening. And very strong focus on reform. And this is very important to unlock the potential of the economy and take the growth rates beyond what is being forecast for the year ahead. And these are things that will take it beyond 7 and to 8. Ease of doing business, cost of doing business, very clearly setting up a task force to create the vision document or the blueprint, so to say, very clearly focused on recognizing much of this has to happen at the state. So the collaboration with the states, incentivization of states, I think these are all positive steps. And, you know, we are also seeing some relief to the middle class in the form of income tax. And with the employment generation and relief on income tax over a period of time, that will also, you know, contribute to the virtuous cycle of investment and employment and so on and so forth.
A lot of the focus so far in past budgets was on public infrastructure. That was really the thrust through government capacity expansion. That's not stopped, but that's been paused at the levels where it was last year. No significant increase in allocations. The government's view now is give money to the middle class. Let's see if they spend and if that can spur demand. How do you see this work out in terms of spurring growth?
Well, actually, this is the fundamental question of this budget. For the last decade, and largely with this government, from 2014, the governing mantra has been, and accepted by all of us, that large outlays, public outlays in infrastructure spend were to pump prime the economy. And the government gave out statistics that for every 1 rupee spent on infra led to 3 rupees of GDP growth, and 1 rupee spent on direct benefit transfer kind of transfers would lead to 90 paisa of GDP growth. So for almost 10 years, we have seen this philosophy at work. If you saw the last many years, 5 lakh became 7.5, 7.5 became 10. So we've seen 30% increases in capital outlays in budget after budget, till suddenly last year we saw 10%, and finally this year we are seeing 0%, flat, right? So the question I pose before you, your viewers and this panel is, is this a signal of a significant shift in government thinking that very large outlay increases in infrastructure will no more be used to pump prime the economy, but we will now move to a different economic doctrine where rising consumer demand, a la reduction in personal taxes, or private sector capex, or hopefully the increase of manufacturing through EODB kind of measures would now substitute this governing mantra. So the question is it going to work? Are there apprehensions? Are there issues? And does this, honesty, to come back to the original question, does this budget signify a significant shift in economic thinking that we have followed for the last 10 years? I have 1 or 2 more issues that deserve discussion, but I'll lay this
but because the fact also is that the allocation which was made last year, for various reasons, including the general election and the long campaign, didn't get spent. And therefore, the government is saying there's no point in just increasing allocation in public infrastructure if it can't get spent. Let's allocate the same and let's spend that money first.
It's a very contentious argument. I'll tell you why. Here is a nation that is following a mantra of increased infrastructure spends, which have multiplier effects on jobs, cement, steel, vast amount of industries. And then you turn around and say, you know, guys, I have hit a roadblock on execution capacity in project development and project execution. And hence I can't spend the money I have. Now, should an economy like and a nation like ours that's pulling ourselves by the bootstrap now face this new constraint that project development and execution capacity leads us to not even use the funds that we have? And secondly, it's a vicious cycle. You say, I have not executed, so I'm cutting outlays. Next year, you don't execute again. Are we going to get into a vicious spiral of saying, I have reached a roadblock on execution capacity, I'm going to cut outlays? It's a very serious, vicious cycle. Let me stop here.
You're calling it a serious, vicious cycle. Chandrajit Banerjee, are you seeing a significant change in government thinking? Because a lot of the economists have been asking for the government to do something to spur consumer demand. Now the government's taken the bull by the horns and said, okay, this is what we can do. We can rationalize income tax structures in a way that we leave more money in the hand of the income taxpayer. Will that have the multiplier effect that's required to push our growth from 6.5 to take it above, closer to 8?
See, consumption itself is a large chunk of our economy. And we have all been talking about much before the budget as to how do we prime consumption. And we have got much more than what one desired. That's point one. And I think it was necessary. The government also, as Vinayak mentioned, has been heavy lifting in terms of capex over the last many years. And there has also been this question as to when does private sector kick in with in terms of investments. And private sector kick in with investments. We have had many discussions on how do we move towards ease of doing business, cost of doing business, decriminalization, etc., etc. That all have been pretty well addressed, number one. Number two, if you really look at the type of infra spend now, which is on rural focus, the 50-year interest-free loan to states, if you really look at things like how we are looking at the national monetization pipeline 2.0, that itself is a lot of money.
But they haven't explained where the money will come from, where it will be used. They just put out a figure of 10 lakh crores.
That's right. There's 10 lakh crores, and of course, much of it will come the way it will. And these are sort of indicators that there is now a huge role for the private sector to come in, which has been being mentioned. You are laying the road and the foundation for the private sector to come in, and government, mind you, has not stopped. I mean, the capex is equal to the nominal growth rate, if one can see it that way. Yes, sir, as you said, that when there is unspent amount, we need to take that forward and see to it we implement that.
Rajiv Emani, Vinayak Chatterjee is talking about a fundamental shift in the government's economic priorities, which he claims comes through this budget and the way that the numbers have been organized. Do you think that's the right way to have gone, given that there's been so much talk about the need to spur demand, particularly in urban areas?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't entirely agree with what Vinayak is saying. I definitely do agree that a little bit more allocation would have, fired up the animal spirits much more. And
allocation on government capex,
on government capex.
But why should the expectation always be from all of you for the government to be spending more on capacity expansion?
I agree with you. I'm not. What I'm saying is that that's why I'm saying that I have disagreement with Vinayak. The number could have been slightly higher, but we can't fire on only one cylinder. I think, the fact that for this to grow, and actually if your fiscal deficit has moved down and has come from 4.8%, now you're projecting 4.4%, and your capex to GDP ratio is almost being the same, and the capex is growing at the nominal GDP growth rate, doesn't mean that we are curtailing down. It means that yes, the capex spend will grow, but at the same rate at which the GDP is growing. Now we need to fire up the other cylinders. What are the other cylinders? Industry is saying that urban consumption is slowing down, rural consumption has picked up. Let's try and address urban consumption. And they have given a massive relief, which was much beyond anyone's wildest expectations. And I think it's also equitable because a lot of middle class and lower income was suffering because of inflation. So there's an aspect of economy, there's an aspect of equity in that. The third is how do you spur manufacturing? I think as CB also mentioned, there is investment in manufacturing that's happening. Private sector is investing, but the expectation is, as you mentioned, that they need to step in more. So if you have to step in more, first is you have to have enough economic space so that all savings are not directed towards government. So your fisc has to stay in control. The biggest thing that all industry was saying was that one is demand has to come back, so you spur the demand through consumption. The second thing is that ease of doing business has to come. There has to be greater simplicity. There has to be better cooperation between various ministries. We have to start looking at public-private partnerships again. There has to be better coordination between center and state. And you have to look at the long-term direction of where this is going. So if you look at that, the budget is also trying to push manufacturing, particularly labor-intensive manufacturing, and manufacturing that goes into new age, whether it's EVs, solar grids, other things. So trying to push that area of manufacturing, trying to push consumption, and at the same time, anything that's capex-led. So I think it's a more holistic, I don't think it's a change in stance, but definitely addressing what the industry has been saying.
Now the question then, Mr. Mukundun, is the impact this 1 lakh crore rupees, which the finance minister says is direct taxes that she's letting go of, will have on consumer-facing sectors and the economy, and the kind of multiplier that these consumers, when they go out and spend, the kind of multiplier this has on economic growth. So what's your reading of the money that's been left on the table by the government for consumers to go out and spend?
So Rahul, I think firstly, let me address the whole issue which we started the discussion with. Was there a pain in middle class? Has it been addressed? It's been addressed. Now it puts money in the hands of the people. But the second big issue is that we also have addressed the issue of jobs. For example, there's a focus on agriculture, focus on MSME. I'm going to come to your point. And thirdly, they've also identified they don't want to let go of the fiscal glide path. So 4.4 they've addressed. What they are now saying is, as far as infrastructure is concerned, it's not infrastructure the way we saw before, but there are many layers to the infrastructure which we need to unpeel. One is the gap in infrastructure. They're saying 3-year project pipeline or public-private partnership. They've asked for that. And that is something which will absolutely fill the gap, which we are saying that there's a slowdown in spending or whatever. It is not a slowdown. It's like inviting the private sector to come in. If private sector is to come in PPI mode, then there must be trust. If you look at this budget, the first time, 10 times the word trust was used. And there was a very clear focus on making sure there's ease of doing business and cost of doing business, and also decriminalization laws, which will bring the private sector also to play a role in infrastructure. So I would disagree with what Vinayak has been saying. This budget is shifting from government only mode to say we are in partnership with everyone in India, a Team India partnership. But let me add a point on what we should count more as infrastructure. For example, the commitment of 20,000 crores to 5 nuclear power plants and committing to getting to 100 gigawatts of nuclear power is a game changer. If you want a base load power sector, if it has to go more and more in solar, it needs more base load. And you don't want to put coal-fired base load, you need to go nuclear.
But that's also responding to Donald Trump and the fact that Prime Minister Modi will be going to America in a couple of weeks
So
from
let
now.
me finish my whole thesis, okay? You're going into nuclear that is the only deal to be done. But if you look at what has been said in terms of civil aviation, there's a whole process which she has said is that she's going to work with customs, she's going to work with civil aviation ministry to make sure ease of moving the goods out of airports. Today, the biggest bottleneck in electronic shipments outside is not electronic production. We can get it done. But if we don't get more airlines to cargo planes to come and take off from those airports, we have built the airports. But how do you increase the capacity? The goods cannot be sitting 35 hours in an airport. It has to move in 3 hours. And Chennai airport has done it. So now they are following the whole pathway of increasing, and she has spoken about it. Then there's an emphasis on shipbuilding and ports. Why? You want to export more. You want to get your goods across and plug into global value chain. What are our partners telling? We can make here. We are happy about it. But how do we get our goods to market more competitively? So we need more competitive ports, we need more ships, we need more shipbuilding, lesser turnaround time. So the whole focus is on saying that, listen, can we get the last mile addressed? So when I say infrastructure is not just about building buildings, but also making sure they're effectively used, efficiently used, and in a way that it sort of promotes the outcomes which we want to do. Now coming back to your point about I think there are 3-4 areas where I think India is in need of technology. Let's be very clear about it. We are building Bharat small reactor. 5 of them are being put out for a bid, and the bid many companies are participating. including many companies from our group. So there is going to be an effort to get into nuclear power. But there are also reactors which are micro reactors, for which the technology is lying with US. We must access the technology. For example, if you get micro reactors, you can make each village, each city power independent. That doesn't need big size. You put in a 40-foot container to give nuclear power. These are technological advances towards sustainability where US has an edge. Secondly, I think the other big thing which we need to also focus with US is about how do we diversify our defense equipment. For example, we've invested from Tata Group into defense, for example, building the cargo carrier where private sector has come in. But really, I think, again, partnership with Europe, partnership with US is extremely critical in that space to move away from single source of our defense. I'm not by any chance saying there's an issue related to the previous source of defense equipment to the newer one, but the new technology really does address getting access to drone technology. How are we going to get our... Lastly, if you want to also prepare talent to cope with it, how do you do it? Now the focus is on saying, listen, I'm going to give broadband to each village. District level school. Now imagine each district level school now has access to broadband, and the kids in 5th and 6th class get access to the latest pedagogy, latest things which are happening around the world. They've got Atal Tinkering Lab to become more creative. You have a situation in 10 years' time when these people will be ready for workforce. We'll have a skilled workforce which is creative, willing to adopt AI, not getting afraid of AI, saying that AI is a game changer for us to participate in the world market. So that's the positive.
Let me get Vinayak Chatterjee to respond before I go across to Dr. Rehan. The argument that Mukundan makes is that look at infrastructure more broadly. It's not just physical infrastructure in the form of more roads, more highways, more bridges. It's the whole spectrum of infrastructure spends, and the budget is doing enough to address it, even if the allocations to just physical infrastructure haven't necessarily gone up.
On a lighter note, this is the first budget in 30 years of participating with CII in these post-budget discussions that I've not heard 3 words mentioned in the budget. Road, highways, railways, and infrastructure allocation. These 3 words are absent in the budget speech, by the way. This is just a little lighter comment. See, I am not denying that every budget has a slew of interventions on infrastructure. BharatNet was announced broadband 10 years ago. Kusum solar pumps was announced some other budget. Every budget sees 10, 20 initiatives for the infrastructure sector. So this is, the fact that another new list has come up to say, okay, this time it's nuclear power, solar, small module reactors. It is schools connectivity. It's fine. I appreciate that because the economy needs interventions this time. But that does not derail the debate to say, are these interventions enough to pump prime the economy to go to 8% GDP? Do you have an alternative model other than infrastructure pump priming the economy? And is the alternative model that all of you are supporting here, I'm in a debate mode as you can see, saying that increasing middle class, disposable income, ease of doing business, are you all convinced that all of these together are going to give you 2%
no, but
increase
can I challenge
GDP?
you to say that had we reached a point where the law of diminishing returns had set in, that you were throwing in more money towards physical infrastructure spends, but wasn't necessarily having the extra multiply. After a while, it kind of plateaued out, and therefore that wasn't the only approach. If it was, then when you increase allocation on public infra by 30%, it should have that kind of multiply, and it didn't.
So the question is it law of diminishing returns or is it the law of diminishing votes? The one argument that I've heard is that building major highways, etc., is not getting the quantum of votes that you thought it would. So what are we talking about? Diminishing political returns or diminishing economic returns? I leave that question for you and other commentators to answer.
Vinayak Chatterjee is on fire this afternoon. That much is clear. Okay, and everybody else is wondering, okay, our guys now kind of out of control. But that's fine. It's good to have this public conversation. It's good to have this debate because, frankly, very often if everybody is restrained in what they say and saying something else off camera and something completely different on camera, then it's no fun. This is far more productive and far more useful. So, Dr. Trehan, we saw a reduction in basic customs duty on some cancer drugs coming in. Far more importantly, we're hearing Donald Trump in that conversation he had with Prime Minister Modi talking about additional tariffs against the Indian pharma sector, which he thinks is taking American consumers and American companies for a ride. So as somebody who's looking at this very carefully, how are you reacting to the cues that you're seeing play out?
So, there are 2 aspects to it. Donald Trump is another story, no matter which way you look at it. So hopefully it'll never come to pass. Coming back to India, today's budget, this is working backwards from 47, the Viksit Bharat announcement that has been made, that where we are going to be. We know that we need to double our healthcare sector in the next 5 to 10 years. That means another 1.5 million beds to be added on because we are way below the average required to keep a healthy India. So towards that, announcement of 10,000 new medical seats for this year is always welcome. Second, the focus was on employment, basically. And the addition of 5 centers of skill excellence is also welcome because that will also help us to actually train the paramedics which are required to build this whole structure that is required to have a healthy India. Then, more importantly, in the skilling sector, the 500 crores committed to the AI Center of Excellence will be very significant because if you look at it, what the rest of the world is doing, it's way ahead of us in stimulating at the school level. And I think this will go a long way. In medicine, we use a lot of AI already, but this is a runway which we have to cover in very short steps in the next 5 years. Now, then comes the inclusion of the gig workers into the PMJY. Now, they were out of the loop. They had no coverage. There's no social security. This is a very welcome move. When you come to cancer, there is a huge relief for cancer patients in 2 forms. One is the fact that the duty was not reduced, it was eliminated. It has become duty exempt. That will give a big relief financially to the cancer victims. Second, the introduction of cancer daycare centers, which are supposed to be in every district, but this year it's supposed to be 200 to be implemented this year. The fact remains that these people who are actually going for their treatment, sometimes even on a weekly basis to get their chemotherapy injections, have to travel a long way, great expense, in pain. I think that's a big relief, big humanitarian step forward. So overall, we are happy with what has been done for the healthcare sector because these are things that are current, need immediate attention because cancer is going rampant not only in India, around the world. And we needed to take these steps. So overall, I would say we are positive, but no big bang announcements.
So Kunal Behel set up Snapdeal, heads up CII Startup Council, and SOPs for startups have been extended to 2030. How do you see that play out in terms of encouraging startup innovation, given the fact that we've seen in the past few days, DeepSeek from China completely upend a lot of typical calculations around startups, around innovation, around AI, and showing just how far ahead the Chinese are of Indian startups who thought, okay, we'll build India into the use case capital of AI and weren't trying to tinker with the fundamental building blocks and building new models of their own. And now they've been caught, off guard.
So I think we are called a startup nation for a reason, and I think the finance minister made it clear why today. I was in the room when the 10,000 crore fund of funds was announced about 10 years ago. And most people in the room rolled their eyes at that point in time saying this will never see the light of day. 10 years later, that 10,000 crore fund of funds has led to capital amplification of 91,000 crores, 100% of which has gone into the startups which are in India, domestic startups, not overseas startups. Imagine the employment that has created, the problems it has led to being solved, the technology base that it has built in the country, the talent training that has happened. Now the government has realized that was a huge success. Let's replenish it with another 10,000 crores. And maybe this time, the next replenishment after this will not happen after 10 years, maybe after 5 years. So the force multiplier of some of these initiatives that have been carried through over a long period of time and executed absolutely perfectly. 140 AIFs, 140 fund of funds, venture capital funds got their start because of the fund of funds that the government started 10 years ago. Similarly, one of the big challenges for the MSME startups is access to credit. Right? They may not be eligible to get equity capital from venture capitalists, but they still need capital to set up their first factory or buy some inventory or buy some raw materials. that credit guarantee being moved from 10 crores to 20 crores can be transformational for a small MSME. Deep techs, you're alluding to, DeepSeek, but particularly deep tech, which is broader than just, a DeepSeek LLM model. We now have a fund of funds for that also. Right? So the government is really not only thinking about today by creating healthcare schemes for gig workers who are largely part of the startup economy, but also thinking ahead of where the arc of the startup ecosystem needs to go.
But you didn't really answer my question, which is whether the focus of these startups which have come up and been successful, whether it's a Snapdeal or several others, were more in the B2C sector where you're using India's large domestic market to fire up the startup engine. At the very core, the kernel of innovation, rethinking, for example, the kind of computing power required to build up an LLM, like we've seen with DeepSeek. Why is that, and given the kind of engineering prowess India has, why is that level of innovation not happening in India? Why are those breakthroughs happening in China and the United States, and despite all our engineering capabilities, we're still marveling at what they're doing?
Look, we are solving the problems that we are encountering, and we are solving them well. Obviously, more can be done. But specific to DeepSeek, it's an open source model. There's no reason we can't use it, and we can use it for free. Right? So there's nobody stopping us. If someone else has done it and given it for free to the rest of the world, let's use it and build on top of it.
That, at one level intrigues me, at another level concerns me, Chandraji Banerjee, that there's a lot that's been built, but largely to tap into the domestic market. Is there any idea that you have or what you think we should be doing to try and tackle the problem at its core? There's so many hyper successful engineers coming out of India, but they're not trying to address the core issues. Rather, they're looking to build use cases of AI. You were in Davos, you heard India is becoming the use case capital of artificial intelligence, but they're not addressing the core problem like the Chinese companies were.
No, actually, if you look at some of the announcements today, what was made in the budget on developing skills which relates to AI, and the centers that we would create on multi-speciality and our centers of excellence on skilling, those are actually addressing the issues of developing the requisite human resources for that. Number two, I dare say that much of it that's happening globally, as you know very well, is actually Indian minds, Indian brains, which are doing that. So third is, like, if we are really looking at how we bring in GCCs and others, and there was a mention of that, into India and attract that human capital into India, I think what to add to what Kunal said, it's something that we can achieve. Lastly, you heard about the AI sort of not just the mission, but the interface that it is that the government would do, or in terms of various stakeholders, with various stakeholders, including industry itself, would also lead to. And India has actually, if you really look at Indian, the entire work that we have done on our digitalization program, which is touched, at a cost which is world competitive, which we can give it to the world, and touched 1.4 billion people. So there are phenomenal examples in India. It's just that, yes, of course, we need much more to do to...
No, but I want to, because I think this is an important issue, so I want to press on it further with Rajiv Memani. The fact is, Indian brains are building models like Perplexity, contributing to models like OpenAI, but not building those successfully so far. I mean, now Ashwini Vaishnav has spoken about setting up a sovereign AI LLM model, but the fact is that we haven't been able to do this so far. Kunal Behel said...
By the way, I just want to add, Perplexity is also a use case, right? Perplexity by itself is not a model.
Sure.
So it is... Actually, you are in some ways answering your own question, where actually some of the most promising companies right now are suddenly the use case companies, whether they are in India or in the US.
No, but I do want to press on, how can we be, in your view, at the very cutting edge of innovation, rather than just addressing the large Indian consumer market, actually be at the cutting edge of innovation?
It's a process, Rahul. I think if you compare the pharma industry as an example, it started with generics, branded generics, exporting generics. And now some of those which have been successful are becoming innovator companies. Also, if you look at one of the issues with Indian industry is the R&D percentage of investment as a percentage of total investment is on the lower side. The risk appetite to build something like this and the amount of capital that you have to draw is very significant. And there are two countries in the world who are able to do that. One is US. Because in US, the entire value creation thesis is around building intellectual property and different assets. It's not so much of building just on revenue streams and everything else. And there's a lot of capital available. The mindset is like that. The mindset is let's do something completely disruptive from an intellectual property standpoint. China, there's a massive state sponsorship for this. So it's partnership with government and everything else. I would say in India, amongst all sectors, if I could see one sector which will move into that space very rapidly, because of the success that they have had and because the mindset of the entrepreneurs, I would say would be in the entire new age, new tech space. So I'm pretty confident that with little bit of sponsorship from the government, you know, if you look at the stacks that you build in an AI model, first is the chips. Chips, NVIDIA is there, some Indian companies are adapting that, right? Then you go to data centers on that. So data centers are, you know, Indians are companies building, everyone building. You go on that, you say, okay, large language model. Now the assumption in India was 3-4 large language models have been built. Do we really need to invest all our time on it? So let's go over to SLM. So a lot of things have been going on the SLM side and on the application of AI. Now we are going back to say, no, we need to create our own India stack, more from a data standpoint and to understand the nuances and everything. And that's what the government is now is starting to do. And I'm pretty sure that there will be a lot of startup founders who in collaboration with government or who with the government or who on their own, given that the capital raising is now becoming more easier, this will start.
No, but we're starting now, Kunal Bhai. Aren't we massively behind the curve on this in terms of where we should have been?
No, we're not.
Why not?
Because we're not. Like,
नहीं उन्होंने बना दिया आवा बोल रहे हम बनाएंगे आगे जाके
पर अगर आप ये सोचो कि उन्होंने बनाया क्या है जिससे आप इतना घबरा रहे हैं ऐसा कुछ बनाया नहीं अभी whatever they have made can be used by us also and we can build on top of it and we can build cutting edge solutions. For the longest time people said why can't India build a Cisco or an SAP etc. But we export $200 billion of software every year. So we have to find what our core capability is, what our core strength is and capitalize on that versus keep thinking they build this, why aren't we building it? Let's build what we know how to build well and do a world-class job at that.
Okay, so the government, the thinking within the government is that the slowdown that we saw in the second quarter of this fiscal is temporary and that growth will recover in the fourth quarter this year. But then the question I have, Mr. Mukundan, is that the Chief Economic Advisor projects growth next year to be between 6.3 and 6.8. Do you think the government didn't punch hard enough, didn't demonstrate enough appetite and ambition and should have really set at least a higher benchmark in terms of its target?
So firstly, let me go back to this piece around AI and LLM.
Sure.
I think really, let me lean into it. I think one of the benefits which both India and China have is that our risk capital, which you spoke about, there's a state sponsorship, but despite all that, I think we don't have pools of cash which other countries have. But it does provide you with a strong emphasis on what I call as a frugal innovation. And we will not go the large language model. I've got the same term, LLM, which is lean language model. And I think there'll be a lot of Indian startups which will get onto lean language model. There'll be people who will back up the local language model. Again, the third form of LLM is the local language. You know, something in Hindi, something in Odisha. So we've got a huge opportunity here. And I'm pretty sure, I agree with Kunal, that's only a start of the race. It's just that everybody is measuring themselves. Of course, there's a discourse which has come in because of Sam Altman's announcements about this is the only way to go. But this at the end of the day, this mathematical model. We engineers know exactly what is there, and we can dive into it. And I know, and Indians are smart, and they've done a good job. So I'm very hopeful that we won't be way behind. If we could launch our space satellite 25 years after Sputnik went up, and we were the first one to go on the dark side of the moon and land it in that spot which we need to, I think there is an opportunity here which we should not lose sight of and stop investing. We should continue the investment. That's my emphasis and thesis, and I fully agree with what Chandrajit said. The 3 centers of excellence are critical. And the centers of excellence in terms of each of the institutions in IITs and Indian Institute of Science, where they're teaching this new mathematics as well as the AI use cases as well as AI, is extremely critical for the future. We must continue to invest in talent. That's one piece. Now, going back to your question in terms of, did we punch hard or punch low? I think the fundamental point is this is the first economic survey, 500 pages long. From the time I've been in MBA, I've been reading every economic survey cover to cover. Where I read it, it did not bore me. There was a story being told, there were cases being highlighted, which were extremely practical. I want to compliment the CA for the effort he has put in bringing out something which is so readable. Now, what is the budget doing? Budget has pulled out from the economic survey foundation and has built upon it 6 areas of reform. Firstly, it said agriculture. Let's fix where the employment is high. Then it has gone into MSME. Then it has gone into exports. Then it has gone into investment. Investment not just in physical capital, you highlighted, into human capital, various types of investments. And all these are needed. Then they've said reform. Without reform, you can't build trust. That is the change. And lastly, keep the fiscal glide path. These are the 6 pillars of this budget, the way I've looked at it. And it triangulates all the pieces. And the outcome may well surprise us. It is rather to be pleasantly surprised than to be despondent because it didn't turn out.
Okay.
So that's where I
that
want
same
to
question to Vinayak Chatterjee. Are you disappointed that the target for growth is in the range of 6.3 to 6.8? Would you have liked to see the government take a more ambitious target for growth?
I agree with him. I'm waiting to be pleasantly surprised. But you are allowing me to be controversial again?
Absolutely, you must.
So I want to ask about being more aggressive about GDP growth and punching. I'm going to use the LLM, large language, modeling on GDP fiscal deficit. Which economist has said that 4.4% is a magic number and we should all applaud it? Because this is conventional thinking. There is a very large school of macroeconomists who argue that for countries like India that's trying to pull themselves by the bootstrap, to pull millions of people out of poverty, to create jobs, to get all the multiplier effects of massive GDP growth, there is nothing sacrosanct about a 4.4% fiscal deficit target. But we are all brainwashed into thinking that's great and we all applaud it. What is wrong with a 4.9% fiscal deficit? You add 0.5% more, do it carefully as many economists suggest, do not give freebies and wasteful expenditure, asset building, nation building, and with the government's own multiple of 3, a 0.5% relaxation of fiscal deficit, taking it to 4.9 will give you 2 lakh crores more of GDP, which multiplied will give you 2 lakh more of investments, which multiplied by 3 give you 6 lakhs more of GDP. So I am questioning some fundamentals rather than taking everything as laudable and given.
Can I counter that by saying that we've already seen indications from rating agencies that India is on the verge of a rating upgrade. And if that were to happen, more bond money would come into India, which has its own virtuous effect. So there is logic in being financially conservative rather than going down the other path. And if you do, then there is no way that rating upgrade will happen.
So the million-dollar question is that what is the magic number? Suppose I was an economist and I argued with you that the magic number is 3.9 and that 4.4 is really not acceptable.
No, but the government has set a fiscal glide path. You can't keep changing your mind on the path that you're setting for yourself.
The question is, you are setting this budget in a situation where you have seen 5.4% GDP. You have seen GDP growth slipping. You have seen central capex slipping. You have seen states capex slipping. You have seen rural and urban demand slipping. You have seen job creation slipping. In this scenario, where you have to pull yourself by the bootstraps, I could give you a convincing set of arguments for that for this year. Let us go back to 4.9%. 2 lakh crores more of investment.
No, but then your numbers have no credibility with the rating agencies. Yes.
Vinayak, the debate, nobody wants to debate with Vinayak, and we all humbly submit to Vinayak's debating prowess. But, after having done that, there is something, and I would like to tend to talk about, if we really we wouldn't have focused on fiscal prudence. It's just not the credit rating agency. And if we would have just, growth is important. And yes, we can grow at 8%. We need to aspire to grow at 10%. There's no doubt about it. But we also need to be cautious about overheating, etc. But look at the other point which has come out very prudently in the budget is the debt target. If you really look at the debt to GDP ratio, which is now being targeted to 50 plus minus 1% by 2031. That also shows that, that also, you talked about credit rating agencies, that also brings in investment. So there are other mechanisms which
are... you want to come in on this? Should the government have tried to do more to grow faster?
Well, let me put it this way. First of all, I think fiscal glide path, fiscal prudence is important. And it has many ramifications. I think CB already alluded to that. So I'm completely aligned with that. And that was also CIA's recommendation to stay with the fiscal glide path. It is also a stated position that the debt to GDP will slide by 1% year on year. And I think that's the right thing to do. The other fundamental thing, if we look at it, from the figure we are talking about 6.3 to 6.8 for next year, what is it really required to get to that 7, beyond 7 and 8? I think the most important thing is job creation at scale. And job creation at scale in a sustainable fashion. So how do you create jobs at scale? So you create jobs at scale by revitalizing and providing impetus to sectors that have a high labor intensity. Now, agriculture, just to take an example, has nearly 50% of the workforce in India. Now, if we can improve farmer incomes, and I think the approach that the government has taken this time, more targeted and focused, 100 districts, integrated approach, has got a certainly great potential of success there. And it's been done, for example, in aspirational districts. There are about 100 plus districts there. And there were the public-private partnerships. And in that public-private partnerships, farmer incomes have actually grown substantially, in fact, doubled in many cases. Look at MSMEs, in that particularly look at footwear, look at toys, look at tourism, and look at exports. Now, these are all sectors that typically have high labor intensity, right? And that's what the budget is, the whole budget is around. The second point I want to say is that to make these happen faster, what needs to make this happen faster and more of it to happen is certainly a lot of ease of doing business, a lot of flexibility in labor regulations, a lot of next generation reforms are required. And that I think the statements there, we must acknowledge a strong statement, setting up a high-level committee to kind of create the blueprint for it. So these are things that will, over time, take the trajectory of the economy to 7 and beyond. Well, so I think a lot of pluses are there in the...
The message in the economic survey was get out of the way, and there's a high risk of economic stagnation if you don't. Setting up a committee is just the first step. The recommendations of the committee, then the implementation of the recommendations of the committee, that's where the proof of the pudding lies.
But let me also say this, that it is, while the vision is getting created, it is not that, what I read in the budget, it's not that everything is going to wait for the committee.
Of course.
On tax regulations, something are announced. On exports, the integrated approach, the incentivization to the states and collaboration with the states in certain areas. I think these are already steps being taken while the blueprint emerges.
Sure. So we've had a fascinating conversation. It's good that everyone's spoken frankly, candidly, and what was in their mind, put that out on the table, which is the whole point of setting up this India Inc. brainstorm. So I want to thank all my guests for joining us and lighting up the shoulders through capacity expansion via public infrastructure. Now the government is changing the calculus, handing money to the middle class, to the taxpayer who seem to be getting irked, whose mood seemed despondent, saying, okay, here is extra cash in your hands. Let's see the multiplier this has on the Indian economy. To talk about the potential impact on growth of this union budget, we've set up a corporate brainstorm here at the CII headquarters. We're broadcasting from the Le Méridien. And I want to introduce you to my guests joining me for this special discussion. I want to start with Sanjeev Puri. He heads up ITC, is currently the president of CII, so welcome. Flanking him is Chandrajit Banerjee, who had several crucial inputs in the formulation of this budget. On behalf of India Inc., is the Director General of CII, so welcome. We have the incoming president of CII, Rajiv Memani, heads up Ernst & Young in India. Thank you, sir, for taking our time. To my left, I want to welcome Mr. Mukundan from Tata Chemicals. Then we've got the infrastructure member, Vinayak Chatterjee, and we've got Naresh Trehan, who's representing the pharma sector, health sector, and remember, not just during this budget, we're also hearing from Donald Trump that there could be new tariffs against the Indian pharma sector. So what impact will that have? Let me start by asking Sanjeev Puri about the potential impact on growth, because if India needs to be in Amrit Kal, become a developed country by 2047, we need to go 8% plus. The economic advisor said we're likely to grow between 6.3 to 6.8 next year. Do you see the maths in the way the finance minister has organized it having a positive impact on growth for next fiscal?
Absolutely, Rahul. I think the estimates, no doubt, for next year are realistic. But very clearly, the pillars have been identified to accelerate this growth going forward. And there are multiple levers that are being touched upon. One is really a lot of focus on areas or economic activities which have a high labor intensity. So agriculture being one, MSMEs, within MSMEs, things like toys, then we're talking of tourism, a lot of focus on exports and this whole idea to have an integrated view, cross-ministerial group, because, you know, given the global context, we need agile responses and very targeted responses, and there are already barriers coming up in global trade. So, you know, FTAs, many of these things have to be negotiated.
Actually says several things about our path towards Vikasit Bharat. It has invested in agriculture. It has certainly looked at rural prosperity, focuses on urban development, particularly looking at urban workers, and continues to lay emphasis on reforms. 6 specified sectors have been identified, and I spoke about it in the budget. Sectors in which we will continue our reform agenda. All this, even as we have continuously been engaged with the stakeholders, and interest of education and health has been prioritized. When we're talking about education, from a child in a daycare center, portion for women, lactating mothers, till the level of getting skilling done, and also for artificial intelligence and digital reading material for students in school and colleges. Every aspect of education, and bringing in that dimension which is so critical for health. Daycare, cancer centers, and making sure more medical seats are available. These are kind of things with which I'm trying to highlight. The approach in this budget has been pointed on areas which definitely need immediate intervention, outlays, and action along with the states. So Vikasit Bharat is not just being described. I've given you also what we mean by Vikasit Bharat, or what is it that we expect to achieve for Vikasit Bharat. So this budget actually has given you several things on which you can understand how this economy is being planned to take forward a route towards Vikasit Bharat. Secretaries have joined me. All of them would also come in to explain or answer and give clarity and so on. But one thing which I certainly would like to highlight is responding to the voice of the people, which is what Prime Minister Modi is known for in his administration. It's a very responsive government. And as a result, the income tax simplification, which I announced in July, is already completed in its works, and we shall bring the bill in the next week. So the income tax simplification, about which in July budget I have gone in detail to say, the work is completed within 6 months is what I said. Within 6 months we've brought the bill. It will be coming into the parliament next week. So if we are talking of reform, inclusive of taxation, the work is done. This budget also speaks about rationalization in customs. Tariffs are being brought down, tariffs are being simplified, and also the basket which consisted of so many different tariffs for so many different commodities are now reduced. 8 were taken off earlier, 8 has been taken off now. So whatever remains now, 7 I think remains, and that is all about India's tariff picture. So the usual narrative which goes on, saying is India being too heavy on tariffs? No, you find that we've drastically reduced and also simplified. So this budget has so many things for all of us to talk about. The more important thing about agriculture, which performed very well during COVID and which has contributed to India's food security, the proposals which are mentioned in this budget actually talk about everything to do with beads to bazaar, literally from the stage of seeds, hybrid seeds, climate resilient seeds, seeds which can give greater output, seeds which are going to be high yielding, all this together to the final point of India becoming the world's food basket. That's the definition I put in when I was talking about Vikasit Bharat. So we are making sure that India's agriculture gets the support across the board, whether it is on seeds, whether it is for skilling the farmers, whether it is rural prosperity, whether it is going to have agriculture and allied industries being set up in rural areas, and whether it is going to be farmers getting better and more loan with interest subvention, not just farmers, fishermen, and also dairy, meaning animal husbandry. So the picture for rural development and the picture for supporting agriculture is across the board, and that has been narrated. The second thing which I would want to highlight is the continued emphasis that we are giving since vote on account budget, July budget, and now on the MSMEs. Whether it is giving them sovereign guaranteed loan, whether it is support during COVID, whether the definition being changed now for better, more inclusive growth in MSMEs, access to bank credit. So MSMEs have also been given greater emphasis. Together with this, I'd like to highlight the point that energy security has had greater attention in this budget. We've highlighted in July budget how even pump storage will have greater attention. Solar and wind and renewable energy has also been taking consistently good importance in our budgets. This time we are talking about the small modular reactors. I've also announced that there shall be 2 amendments, one to the Atomic Energy Act and the other one for the civil liability. All of this is going to help us attain energy security. Insurance sector's FDI limits have been enhanced. That is another important announcement. I'll end my opening statement with 2 things. There is no reduction in the public spending on capital expenditure. Let's put that up front. We continue to place emphasis on the multiplier effect that capital expenditure done by government has shown, has sustained us. We continue on that. And with all this, our fiscal prudence has aligned itself to the glide path that we announced in 2020-21. So we've kept ourselves in alignment. Fiscal prudence has been maintained. The next year, coming years, estimate is also been given. Well under 4.5 is what we had said earlier. We are also projecting the same. So this is just as an opening statement. There's a lot more to say, but as you all ask questions, so shall we answer. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. 225. 225. Mic, please.
Ma'am, this is Shrimi Chaudhary from NDTV Profit. I just wanted to understand, ma'am, here. You said the new income tax bill will come next week. Will that be in the form of draft, and where you are also going to take stakeholder comments on that?
Yes, as a bill, any bill goes to the standing committee, and the standing committee will of course consult with so many stakeholders, and then it will come back to us, and if necessary, any more amendments if need to be brought in, we'll bring it in and take it forward in the House.
So do we expect implementation in this in the fiscal year in FY26?
Do you expect what?
Do we expect the implementation of?
Well, let it get passed. I hope it will get passed without much of a difficulty, but it is only after its passing.
Sure. Thanks.
35. Front.
Ma'am, Jaipurya, this side from CNBC TV 18. As you said, this is a very responsive government, which is why government decided to give these tax rebates. But given the structure that you have announced, ma'am, up to 12 lakh is the rebate. Any reason why this rebate has been hiked from 7 to 12 lakh? Is it that the incomes or salaries were not growing up to the mark, which is why government thought that this rebate needs to be given? And also, how do you make up for this 1 lakh crore of revenue loss Will it not impact the budget estimates? Where will you get this money from?
Tripti, I think the first question is, you said that this, when the incomes are not growing. This is an income tax. Only when there is an income, then we are talking of the tax. So income has to grow to the level to discuss about the tax. Now, why from 7 to 12 lakh? It is something like, it was earlier 2.2 lakhs. When 2014, it became 2.5 lakh, nobody is going to pay tax. Then there was a 2019 that, we said 5 lakhs, nobody is going to pay tax. And we said it was raised to 7 lakhs. And now it's being raised to 12 lakhs. So this is a perception that the government feels that, on the average 1 lakh per month, if you have, then you need not pay tax, which means that, we are doing it in two ways. One is we are reducing the slab rates. We are expanding the slabs. If you would have noticed, the slabs are now 0 to 4 to the uniform slabs, and there is a gradualism. There was a thing when we had earlier 20%, then it was jumping to 30%. Now it is 20, we have introduced 25 also. So it is a gradual thing which has been done. Now this benefits every one of the taxpayers, because whatever benefits which has come from the slabs gets transmitted across. So therefore everyone gets a benefit. Now the second part, FM decided that, some people should get a little more benefit than merely slab rate reduction could have given. And so therefore an extra rebate. So slab rate reduction for everyone, and extra rebate for 7 lakhs were already getting it, now 7 to 5 lakhs more people have been added. So this is the philosophy behind it. And as you said, why you do it, I think we expect that all that money which they gave, it comes back to the economy in either consumption, savings or investments, in whatever way they choose to do.
I just want to add to that. If you compare what we've done today with what prevailed in 2014 under the Congress government, what we are, most often the narrative is we should put money back in the hands of the people. I want to please give this comparison for your consideration. If you compare it with the 2014 tax rates under the Congress, for somebody who's earning 8 lakhs, nearly 1 lakh more money is in their pockets today because of the amendments that we brought in. Meaning, 1 lakh income tax in 2014 is 0 income tax now. So that money is going back to the people in their hands for those who are earning 8 lakhs. For those earning 12 lakhs, 2 lakh was the income tax in 2014 versus today 0 which is proposed. Meaning nearly 2 lakh more money in the pockets of people who are earning 12 lakh. Alright, did I stop it there? As Finance Secretary rightly said, across the board everybody is getting benefit because the rates have also been brought down. Not just the rebates being given to up to 12 lakhs. Rates for everybody is being brought down. As a result, take somebody who earns 24 lakhs in a year. The income tax on them in 2014 was 5.6 lakhs. 2014. For them, now it is only 3 lakhs. The rate change has benefited somebody who earns 24 lakh as well. So 2.6 lakh rupees more in the pocket of people who are earning 24 lakh. So it is not just those who are up to 12 lakh because they are not paying any tax at all, because rebate is given to make up for the tax amount which they have to pay. It is not just up to 12 lakh. Even for others, benefit is accruing, and compared to what it was in 14, that much amount of money is going back to those respective money earners. Just compare it with 24 tax rates, which is prevailing now, and what is being proposed. I would like to draw the comparison. 8 lakh people, meaning those who are earning 8 lakhs. 30,000 rupees more is being put back into their pockets, meaning they would be paying 30,000 in the prevailing tax, 8 lakh salaried wale. Now they pay 0 in the new proposal. Similarly, 12 lakh salary or income wale would have 80,000 rupees tax to pay in the current prevailing taxation rates. They would have 80,000 rupees now go back to their pockets. They don't have to pay that tax. Go to the 24 lakh and compare with the present rates. Present prevailing rate, they have to pay 4.1 lakh rupees as tax. We are saying now they will have 1.10 lakh in their pockets, which they don't have to pay as tax. So we have put good substantial amounts into the pockets of people who deserve to get that. And I would want that to be highlighted compared to what prevailed in 14 and what prevails just this year.
3. Three numbers.
Ma'am, many congratulations. Something that has been quoted to you as well as the Prime Minister and yesterday the Chief Economic Advisor hinted, in terms of disinvestment and where you should not get into, government. You yourself have been talking from 2020, 21 and subsequently, government should be in less spaces. Has it been a strategy? Because I know you're committed to it, but last budget you didn't refer to it. This budget you have not referred to it. The target still remains there. Is there any impetus that you're going to do towards what has already been announced by the budget? For example, bank privatization of banks and others. That's one. And the second because that was unanswered, you're making it simpler, the income tax, and bringing a thing. Does that mean that you can now not necessarily all the time you can do it through a schedule or an executive order if you want to give some relief to a common man in the new income tax bill that you bring in?
No, giving relief any time will have to go to the Parliament, because if we are giving fiscal relief to people, it has to have approval from the Parliament. So but what the tax simplification really means is the complication in the language, the circuitous way in which they were explaining things, and adding too many exemptions. You will realize that when we brought in the new tax regime, we didn't want the old tax regime imitated or copied. In that, there are several exemptions given in the old regime. In the new, we didn't want to give any, because we wanted a simple, straightforward tax regime in which the rates can be brought down. That's what we've done even now. So the act itself had to be simplified. The attempt now is that.
And on the disinvestment and...
No, all that will continue. There won't be a relenting on any of this.
On disinvestment, if I can add, you see, the last time July also the similar questions were asked. We have actually since then a value creation strategy, which was actually well explained at that time also. There is no disinvestment target per se. Disinvestment and dividend are both looked at together because both are money and money is fungible. And it has got 5 elements. The first element is that we are saying CPSC's performance. The second is we say that we should have communication of performance. The third we say that the capex of the CPSC, which is important, as you know, in terms of accelerating growth. The fourth is the consistent dividend policy. And the fifth is there is a calibrated disinvestment strategy. And the disinvestment also is there. The listing is a part of disinvestment itself. So if you really look at it, both dividend and disinvestment is about 80 to 90,000 crore per annum are being raised, but in a manner which are beneficial to the minority shareholders who are there in all our listed companies.
65. That's it.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Ruchi Bhatia from Bloomberg News. I have a question for the Revenue Secretary and a question for you. If the Revenue Secretary can give us details on the benefits, the number of people who will benefit from the slab, from the rebates going up from 7 lakhs to 12 lakhs. And the question for you, Madam Finance Minister, a lot of people say that while the absolute number for CAPEX has gone up, the pace of spending has gone down as compared to a few years ago. is it telling of the institutional capacity in terms of how much capex push can the government really do? And secondly, as far as a lot of analysts do say that the multiplier that capex has is a lot more than the multiplier in the economy than that tax cuts have. What would you say to like some of those concerns as well?
Well, 1 crore people will both benefit between the 7 lakh and 12 lakhs.
Meaning 1 crore more people will pay no tax. On the capex, I think there are two things playing out. One, of course, this particular year has had the elections happening, and because of that, both central government and state governments were catching up with investments, public spending on investments only from the second and the third quarter, so it showed. It's equally true that when fundamental requirements are taken care of, when you're bringing in additional overhead, there is a pace at which those additions happen. So it's not as if there is no thirst for capital expenditure, but now it will be at a pace in which you can build on each one of the developments that you've done prior. So it will continue. There are some departments which will need more. There are others who would probably reach a plateau, but expenditure will have to continue even in them. So the heads where the capital expenditure will happen will vary, but expenditure will happen in building assets.
121.
No, capex is also continuing. I have not foregone capex to give for revenue expenditure or consumption expenditure. So both continue. Yeah, okay.
Look at what the overall numbers are. Even in the coming year, the next year, effective capital expenditure, including what Government of India provides to state for their capital expenditure, is 4.3% of the GDP, one of the highest. It is not just what Government of India departments spend, it is the total money which goes for the capital expenditure. And if you look at that compared with this year's RE, there will be 20% increase. If you look B to B, still there will be a 10% increase. And it is not a capacity issue, it is a new sectors coming up. For example, if you notice, urban sector, the allocations are increasing. There is one area which requires a renewed focus. 121.
On the capex, because this point can come up later also. So one is the capex that we give directly, that is we do a central government directly. Other is that grants that we give to the state governments, for the state governments to do capex. For example, for Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, for example, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and so on and so forth. So if you also include the grants in aid for creation of capital assets, the total amount has gone up to 15.48 crores in the budget estimate for the next year, which is more than 15% increase over the current year's RE. So that is a substantial increase, whereas you consider that the overall expenditure, that is revenue plus capital, has grown by around 7% in the next financial year as compared to this year's RE. So this is almost twice the aggregate growth in the expenditure.
Yes. I would like to also add that on top of this 15 lakh crore capex, which is 11.2 there, and the extra money which goes into revenue but goes in capital building at the hand of the states, the CPSE, the Central Public Sector Enterprises, add about 4 lakh crore as capex from their own resources. So that's also the capex which goes in, and that is not counted here.
Mike on.
तरुण शर्मा फ्रॉम जी बिजनेस। मैम मेरे दो सवाल हैं। एक, मैम आपने इंश्योरेंस की जो एफडीआई लिमिट है वो 74 से 100% करिए, तो क्या मैम जो इंश्योरेंस अमेंडमेंट बिल था उसकी जो बाकी रिकमेंडेशन है उसको रिजेक्ट किया गया है, सिर्फ इसी को एक्सेप्ट किया है 74 से 100% का? दूसरा मैम, मूडीज ने कहा है कि जो पब्लिक डेट है स्टेट और सेंट्रल का वो अभी भी 80% है, इस वजह से हम रेटिंग अपग्रेड इस बजट के अनाउंसमेंट के हिसाब से नहीं कर सकते। तो डू यू थिंक इज देयर कंसर्न फॉर द ऑन द पब्लिक डेट?
बोलो
insurance? Yeah. See, now, presently the insurance is 74%. Now, fundamentally, whether it's 74% or 100%, the material doesn't matter. What actually matters is the psychological feeling that they can actually own the company 100%. Along with this FDI, we are also going to, FM also announced that we are going to simplify certain procedures and rules that we frame, which is including the key management personnel, person who can be chairman of the company, and person who can be the CEO and board of directors, and also repatriation of dividends. All those are part of this, the proposed reforms that has been announced by the FM today.
And sir, what about the other recommendation on the draft insurance amendment bill?
That's what we are actually bringing. The draft insurance bill is the one FM has announced, but the main point she has mentioned that 100% FDI, including simplification of existing rules for FDI investment.
The draft bill is also coming.
Is coming.
Under this?
Yes. And then the public debt, on the public.
Serial number 2, Finance Minister has also announced, this answer complete his question, the roadmap for fiscal consolidation by the centre. And please have a look at the FRBM statement, which carries the different scenarios, and over a period of next 6 years, how that will be brought down. Similar one, act has to be done through the state governments as well. So it is a process which is on.
Number 2.
हेलो नमस्कार मैम, मैं आलोक प्रियदर्शी हूँ CNBC आवाज़ से। मैम मेरा सवाल है कि मिडिल क्लास के लिए काफ़ी बड़ी राहत है, 12 लाख तक जो टैक्स छूट दी गई है। इसमें आपने बजट स्पीच में कहा जो कैपिटल गेन से लोग कमाई करेंगे उसको इसमें शामिल नहीं किया गया, उस पर नॉर्मली टैक्स देना पड़ेगा जो स्लैब के रेट से है। तो ज़्यादातर लोग आजकल मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, उनको लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट होती है, उनको कैपिटल गेन्स होते हैं कई तरह से, उनको बाहर रखने का, उनको केप्ट असाइड रखने का क्या रीज़न है, क्या उसके पीछे वजह है?
रेवेन्यू सेक्रेटरी उसके ऊपर ज़्यादा विस्तार से बोलेंगे। बाहर रखने वाले चीज़ नहीं है, इनकम का कैलकुलेशन कभी भी वैसे ही होता है, उसमें कैपिटल गेन्स का जोड़ते नहीं है। मैं स्पष्टता के लिए उसको जोड़ रखा है उधर सेंटेंस पढ़ने के समय। ये नया मेरा पद्धति नहीं है कि इसको अलग रखो उसको अलग। इनकम कैलकुलेशन इन जनरल इज डन विदाउट द कैपिटल गेन्स। यू वांट एक्सप्लेन इट?
कैपिटल गेन्स टैक्स जो है वो हमेशा से रेट से अलग है, नॉर्मल इनकम से अलग है। यदि नॉर्मल इनकम में होता, शामिल होता, तो यदि 30% के ब्रैकेट में कोई होता कि उसके कैपिटल गेन्स में 30% टैक्स लगता, तो वो क्या मान्य होता? तो कैपिटल गेन्स को एक अलग टैक्स की व्यवस्था की गई है जो कि कम है। वो इसलिए की गई है कि रिस्क उसमें है और उसमें लोग रिटर्न करते हैं कैपिटल मार्केट को बढ़ावा देने के लिए, तो उसमें 12.5% हमने टैक्स लगाया, तो वो एक अलग रखा जाता है। उसमें एक अलग एग्जेम्पशन लिमिट भी है। यदि वो एक साल में कैपिटल गेन्स आपको इज इट 1.25 लाख 1.25 लाख यदि हो तो वो एग्जेम्प्ट भी होता है, तो और यदि शॉर्ट टर्म हो तो वो 20% होता है, तो वो एक व्यवस्था अलग है। और नॉर्मल इनकम की व्यवस्था है जो कि स्लैब रेट और उससे काउंट होती है, तो इसलिए वो अलग ही है। कंफ्यूजन ना हो इसलिए वित्त मंत्री जी ने स्पष्ट उसको कर दिया था स्पीच में, क्योंकि ये कंफ्यूजन की संभावना थी कि सब लोग ये समझेंगे, तो उसको स्पष्ट किया गया।
46 पीछे
Hello ma'am, Harsh Kumar from Business Standard newspaper. Ma'am, since government has decided to move ahead with a comprehensive asset monetization plan, so what are the new changes from the previous one, and if you can give some broader aspects of it in detail?
See, as we are aware that till the last year, the first program which was launched in 2021, achievements have been of the order of about 90%, which is a good progress. Based on that success is the next leap, almost double the amount which are coming up. And there are newer asset classes will also be come up. For example, transmission assets, and not just of the Government of India. Government of India doesn't own, say, power corporation, power transmission corporation, but state government's assets are also there. So they will do the monetization, and you will hear very soon that entire plan will be out.
Sir, can we, in future, can we get a separate number of asset monetization and disinvestment?
See, this money, what the intent is, there's already an investment or other the assets are there, which may be owned by Government of India, which may be owned by, say, NHAI, or they may be owned by one of the PSUs. They disinvest, not disinvest, they monetize that asset and use that money to build a fresh or a new project and a new asset, plow back that money back into the economy. So these are not necessarily money coming to Consolidated Fund of India. Very rarely the money comes in. NHAI doesn't invest, money remains with them, they build another road by using that money.
13.
Hi ma'am, good afternoon. I am Kriti, I'm from Informist Media. So right now you just said that your fiscal prudence has finally aligned with your glide path that you had announced in FY21. This year you have given a new roadmap, so mentioned debt to GDP roadmap. You aim to bring down your debt to GDP ratio to 49 to 51% by FY31, considering the nominal GDP would be in the range of 10 to 11. So based on that, and you said that you will peg your fiscal deficit in a way that it goes on to bring down your debt to GDP ratio. So is there a rough estimation of what kind of fiscal deficit you may have by FY31? And secondly, on 31, when you aim to bring down your debt to GDP ratio. Secondly, on funding of fiscal deficit for the next...
Akshay, I can't hear you. All right, that was the finance minister in the press conference taking all those questions right there. Of course, one thing is clear, that finance minister has said that the focus of this budget is the middle class.
Our path towards Vikasit Bharat. It has invested in agriculture. It has certainly looked at rural prosperity. Focuses on urban development, particularly looking at urban workers, and continues to lay emphasis on reforms. 6 specified sectors have been identified, and I spoke about it in the budget. Sectors in which we will continue our reform agenda. All this, even as we have continuously been engaged with the stakeholders, and interest of education and health has been prioritized. When we're talking about education, from a child in a daycare center, portion for women, lactating mothers, till the level of getting skilling done, and also for artificial intelligence and digital reading material for students in school and colleges. Every aspect of education, and bringing in that dimension which is so critical for health. Daycare, cancer centers, and making sure more medical seats are available. These are kind of things with which I'm trying to highlight. The approach in this budget has been pointed on areas which definitely need immediate intervention, outlays, and action along with the states. So Vikasit Bharat is not just being described. I've given you also what we mean by Vikasit Bharat, or what is it that we expect to achieve for Vikasit Bharat. So this budget actually has given you several things on which you can understand how this economy is being planned to take forward a route towards Vikasit Bharat. Secretaries have joined me. All of them would also come in to explain or answer and give clarity and so on. But one thing which I certainly would like to highlight is responding to the voice of the people, which is what Prime Minister Modi is known for in his administration. It's a very responsive government. And as a result, the income tax simplification, which I announced in July, is already completed in its works, and we shall bring the bill in the next week. So the income tax simplification, about which in July budget I have gone in detail to say, the work is completed within 6 months is what I said. Within 6 months we've brought the bill. It will be coming into the Parliament next week. So if we are talking of reform, inclusive of taxation, the work is done. This budget also speaks about rationalization in customs. Tariffs are being brought down, tariffs are being simplified, and also the basket which consisted of so many different tariffs for so many different commodities are now reduced. 8 were taken off earlier, 8 has been taken off now. So whatever remains now, 7 I think remains, and that is all about India's tariff picture. So the usual narrative which goes on, saying is India being too heavy on tariffs? No, you find that we've drastically reduced and also simplified. So this budget has so many things for all of us to talk about. The more important thing about agriculture, which performed very well during COVID and which has contributed to India's food security, the proposals which are mentioned in this budget actually talk about everything to do with beej to bazaar, literally from the stage of seeds, hybrid seeds, climate resilient seeds, seeds which can give greater output, seeds which are going to be high yielding, all this together to the final point of India becoming the world's food basket. That's the definition I put in when I was talking about Vikasit Bharat. So we are making sure that India's agriculture gets the support across the board, whether it is on seeds, whether it is for skilling the farmers, whether it is rural prosperity, whether it is going to have agriculture and allied industries being set up in rural areas, and whether it is going to be farmers getting better and more loan with interest subvention, not just farmers, fishermen, and also dairy, meaning animal husbandry. So the picture for rural development and the picture for supporting agriculture is across the board, and that has been narrated. The second thing which I would want to highlight is the continued emphasis that we are giving since vote on account budget, July budget, and now on the MSMEs. Whether it is giving them sovereign guaranteed loan, whether it is support during COVID, whether the definition being changed now for better, more inclusive growth in MSMEs, access to bank credit. So MSMEs have also been given greater emphasis. Together